Hey everybody, we're the Beer Guys here at one of Eugene, Oregon's finest breweries, checking out the cool stuff they do, Oakshire Brewing. Come with us as we check out cool people doing cool things in beer.
My name is Dan Russo. I'm the Director of Brewing Operations here at Oakshire Brewing. I run our brewing department, our brewing programs, and make sure our beer gets out to distributors, to the pubs, that it tastes great, and that I have all the ingredients and hops and all that kind of stuff to make the beer. We have 3 distinct brewing programs here at Oakshire. These kind of have developed over the 13 years that we've been around. They all kind of morphed themselves into what became of our core pilot and vintage programs. That really came together in 2016 when we did our big rebranding, and we took our original tree and morphed it into what our new tree is. And those 3 circles that are in our logo represent what our tree is and what our brewing programs are. So we're going to start talking about our different programs and introducing some of the beer. The first one we're going to do is the newest entrance to our year-round program. It started last year as a new seasonal. This is called Reclaim the Fame. So this comes in at about 7.2% alcohol. It's hopped new school, old school. So we wanted to bring some of that new school into the old school realm. So we have the old school hops of Simcoe, Columbus, Chinook, a little Centennials in there, and they brought a new school with Mosaic, Simcoe, and a little Citra, just to kind of really bring everything out. So it's like, it's got the fruity tropicalness, but it's got that old school, like danky, like almost smells like a bag of weed character. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you can't do that and with an IPA. I don't know what you're doing. Right. Cheers. Thanks, guys. So the core program for us is really just about what has become our fan favorites, the ones that we've seen the most reception on. And it's the ones that have lived throughout the entire history, and started with the entire history, and really, found their way in.
I'm enjoying this.
I'm loving this. This is incredible. This is so good.
So the second major program of our beer, what we make is called our pilot program. As I kind of mentioned earlier, that's like our fast thought program, where we come up with ideas. Fast thought being relative, it breaks away from our normal core program that we make all the time. Gives us as brewers creative freedom. And so we do a bunch of different stuff. And this is where a lot of our collaboration beers, which is actually what one of these is right now. A brewery in Connecticut called Two Roads Brewing. Okay. The brewmaster for they've actually been longtime friends of ours through very different channels, but their brewmaster, this guy Phil Markowski, he literally wrote the book called Farmhouse Sales. I'd always wanted to do something. I had friends that worked with them. We ended up getting linked up to do a collaboration with their wild sour side, which is called Area 2. But as I was traveling out to Connecticut and he was coming out here, we decided to make those trips across country worthwhile. We might as well make 2 beers. It's called Coastal Exchange. And when I went out to Connecticut in December, we decided to make a West Coast IPA, like classic West Coast IPA, but with a little new school influence. Purposely a little more drier than a lot of the hazies you have, a little more bordering on that West Coast feel, but still with that really big full mouth feel. Big, classic, juicy, fruity, and then that like old school Simcoe, piney, resiny character.
That's what I'm getting.
A lot more citrusy.
Yes.
Yeah. Because as I'm trying this, I'm like, what am I tasting? And it's like, it tastes like an outdoor beer. It tastes outside. And when you said piney, I'm like, yes, piney. That's what it is.
It's like a piney, like earthy, like kind of character, but in like a good way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like almost like good dirty. Yeah. It's good dirt. It's good dirt. It's good dirt. It's like sometimes the best thing in the morning is like a fresh dew meadow. Yeah. You're like, oh, it smells. It's like wet. It's awesome.
This one's got to be fresh off the press, huh? Because there was no cans.
No, this one's still in tank. Yeah. Let me know you went over to go.
All right.
So this is our Doggerland Baltic Porter. So
this is nice.
Baltic Porter is styled much like a Russian Imperial Stout. It's the same kind of character where there was these massive stouts that were brewed in England, and the Tsaress of Russia, Queen Catherine the Great, loved them so much that she had these brewers make these stouts and make them huge so they could make the traverse all the way across Europe into Russia. So this was basically taking the English style porter, adding lager yeast to it. So making this really dark beer, taking a traditional roasty kind of porter recipe, adding lager yeast to it. So this is lagered. This is at about 2.5 months right now. We actually release this for about another 8 weeks.
Yeah.
It's a really cool style.
This is totally delicious.
So the cool part is like you get some of that classic like porter like roastiness character. We added a little bit of cherrywood smoked malt to it. And most of the time I only use smoked malt in like my barrel aged imperial stout recipes. But fresh, there's like it just adds this like really awesome depth of character that ends up coming into our vintage barrel aged program. So our vintage program is for the most part our barrel aged programs and spirits that spend any amount of time in barrel. Mostly the minimum is about 6 months. The basis of our program, kind of the flagship of our program, is Hellshire. It's our biggest release that we do every year. It's going into its 10th release this year. Yeah, while we're doing cheers.
Cheers.
So the two sides of the program live in our mixed culture wine barrel aged side, which is what we see right behind us, and then the other side is our spirit barrel aged side. Mixed culture beers, generally, it's basically about the local microflora. They're fermented in open oak, so they're in oak. They're fermented open for about 7 to 10 days, and then we put them into barrels, more barrels, for the remainder of their life. They'll finish their fermentation and their maturation, and then they do not go back to stainless steel until they either go onto fruit or they're just blended together, which is in the case of this. This is our 13th anniversary beer. This is we just released this in October in celebration of our 13th birthday, and this is a blend of different varying levels of these saison type beers. Basically, the cool part about the wine barrel aged side, and I think Matt, I'm sure, talked about this at Ale Song, is that especially with this stuff, it much more becomes like a blending. You're actually like, okay, what about 25% of this beer, 30% of this beer, and then all of a sudden you get this like really complex blend, trying to figure out you want a little bit of funk, you want a little bit of that like champagne effervescence, like a little bit of that like almost white winey character, like it's almost like a Pinot Gris, and then like a balanced acidity. I like sour beer, but I don't like mouth ripping sour beer. And this is all about building balance into your beer. So, and then the other side of our we got this other guy, we're sitting on it. So this is beer, it's unreleased yet, should actually be out in the next month and a half. It's actually a series of 2 different releases under the same beer. So this is a bourbon barrel aged English barley wine that's going to be called the Fear That Passes Over Us.
Ooh.
Wow, I love every time I say this beer, it's awesome. So this is an English style barley wine. We brewed this in, I want to say November of 2017. And it was put into Old Fitzgerald barrels. So some Old Forester barrels, I'm sorry, not Fitzgerald, Old Forester Kentucky bourbon barrels. So we mainly use Kentucky bourbon for whiskey barrels particularly. Other barrels you'll get from everywhere else, but I have a thing for Kentucky bourbon barrels. There's some really awesome, really cool stuff.
Cool.
This is super buttery.
It's crazy. It's like caramel. It's caramel.
It is
caramel and maple syrup. So, welcome to Oakshire Brewing. This is the original brewery. This is where we've been since we were founded in 2006. We were founded by 2 brothers, Jeff and Chris Althouse. Jeff was a high school math teacher, and his brother was a mobile party DJ. And they actually both lived up in like the Albany Corvallis area, and were homebrewing like crazy, and kind of saw a blank in the market, and they decided that there was a niche to be filled down here. And really the only thing they wanted to do when we founded Oakshire, or Jeff founded Oakshire, was to make our amber ale and sell it on draft. And so he put together some, actually in that process, him and his brother started a window washing company to raise the funds to make this thing happen, and took some investments from family and friends, and with $90,000 built this brewery. Okay. We started with a little 4-bed. Actually, it was only this first half of the building. this is all 4,000 square feet total. This first 2,000 square feet in the back half did not exist at the time. And basically got a 4-barrel brew house and one 8-barrel fermenter. We currently have a 20-barrel brew house and a bunch of different varying sizes of fermenters, which we'll get to see. And we're doing about 8,500 barrels a year. So this lab right here used to be our bar. We have a big cooler back there. And that's where we were serving all our beer. And then in 2012, we decided this place would get crazy. So to open up a place in the Whitaker, and that's where we started and opened up that in April of 2013. And that's actually where my story comes into this as well. So I came on in February 2013 to open up the public house. Started out here and eventually opened up the pub in April. Ran that place for about 14 months. In that process, I knew I wanted to be a brewer. I told them I wanted to be a brewer, but I told them that like my job is to run your pub. I will run it to the best of my ability. In that process, I applied to the Glen Hay Falconer Foundation for a scholarship to the American Brewers Guild, and actually received it and went to brewing school. And, 22 weeks of distance education and then 1 week in Vermont, and I was in Vermont in July of 2014 or June 2014, and got a call from our COO at the time, and he was like, hey, so we want you to start brewing for us next week. And that's kind of the story about how I got into the actual brewing side of the business, which is pretty awesome. So the actual brewery itself for us all starts, if you guys have never been through the brewery before, this is our mill room. All these specialty malts all have a different purpose for what we're going to put into the grain. There's our base malt, that big silo that's outside that holds all the base malt. That's where all our sugar is going to come from, or the starch that gets made into sugar. And then all our specialty malt is going to be what's going to add color, flavor, readjust acid for our mash and all that kind of stuff. So what we do is we start pumping in the grain from our silo into this guy. This is our mill right here. And then it's going to grind it all up, break open the husks, and then go into our grist case, which I'll show you guys in a minute. So after we add all our specialty malts, we're going to take it to the brew house, put it into our grist case, which is a big, basically cow feed contraption on top. Holds all of our grain. This allows us to mill in before we start the next process of mashing in. Shortens up our brew day for us, really helps. So this first vessel we put into, it's called a mash lauter. A mash tun, lauter tun. It's a combined vessel. What this is going to do, we're going to start running our grain through this contraption up here, which is called a hydrator. And it's going to start spraying the grain with hot water. What the water is going to do, that hot water actually activates enzymes on the grain, the broken open grain, and it converts all of that starch now into the sugar we need for fermentation. And we're going to let it sit through a mash rest. So usually about 15 minutes to an hour process for that, and it sits. And then we're going to start a process called bore lofting. So if you look, there's a bunch of plates down here. This is what we call a false bottom. Capture that grain as best as possible. So what we do is we start running the grain into this clear grant on the side. And it fills up, and when you start looking at that at the beginning, it's going to look like a cup of porridge. So as we start pumping it over, the grain husk starts settling into different layers and actually starts naturally filtering the beer. So after about half an hour, that what looked like this big soupy mess of grain becomes near crystal clear. And so now we have this like crystal clear form of what we're calling wort, which is basically the brewer's term for sugar water. And then we get to move that over to the kettle. So that bore lofting takes about a half an hour, and then we're going to start a process called sparging. So there's not enough water left in the mash tun to actually fill up the kettle. So we start running it off, and we start spraying it, or what we call sparging it with hot water, and that's basically just rinsing off all the sugar off the grain. And that's going to get all the sugar we need, and we wait until the kettle gets up, and we have the burner on, and then the beer starts boiling. So then we start boiling, and boiling does multiple different things for us. It kind of takes all the different flavors of all the different grains, like you're making soup, and mixes them all together, like makes them one cohesive unit. And then it sterilizes the beer. Boiling, we don't want any foreign bacteria or wild yeasts unless we want to introduce them ourselves. And then it also just like melds all the flavors together and allows us to add our specialty ingredients. So at the beginning of our specialty ingredients, the one that's primarily here is our hops. We then move the beer to our whirlpool. This is just basically, as the mash lauter can be 2 vessels, this can be done in this as well. You'll see the same outlet down the side here as you'll see on the side of the kettle, this tangential outlet. Basically what this does is it lengthens our brew cycle. We can brew up to 3 batches of beer a day at the current staff that we have. And what this does is it moves the beer over quicker so we can start moving the next beer into the kettle. What this does though is we go through the tangential outlet. It's basically throwing the beer around the side at a very fast pace. And there's all that hops and all the specialty ingredients we threw in. Malt also has a lot of protein in it, form what's called trub, or trub, T-R-U-B. And as we start spinning that around really quickly, all of that trub gets thrown to the sides in centrifugal force and forced to the bottom into a cone. It's basically another form of self-filtration that was developed over hundreds of years. So we're not using a filter in this process, and basically that means we get the clearest wort possible. After this, we are going to move to this cellar. So this is what we call a cellar. This is where this is where the beer spends the most amount of time. A batch of beer out of the brew house takes us about 5 hours for most of our beer. And this is where the beer will spend anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months if it doesn't go into barrels. So we put them in the fermenters. We have a bunch of different sizes of fermenters. We have our single batch fermenters, so this is where most of our pilot beers are going to go through. These fit 1 kettle full of beer. Our next biggest tanks now are our 40 barrel tanks. That's where a lot of our seasonals come out of. So we basically keep them as fresh as possible, keep them moving. And then our big 80 barrel tanks are where our core beers mainly are brewed through. These are where Watershed and their stouts and Trophonics are made. And so that's 4 kettle fills. As we come over to the side, so after we crash the tank, we're gonna put it into our bright tanks, which are basically our conditioning clearing tanks, which are the little guy road trip, our 2 80 barrel tanks, and then we have a couple of 160 barrel tanks, which are the big guys, which we'll brew like lager into and do a bunch of batches and let it sit. So these tanks are where we do our conditioning. Basically, beer, it makes what we call a green flavor when it started. It's like the beer hasn't fully melted together. There's still the yeast character that's going on. So what we want to do is we want to let it sit. It's going to mellow itself out. This is where we also carbonate the tanks. So you can see what we're doing right now. Yeah. Afterwards, it's ready to go to our packaging. We are primarily now, actually, at the end of this last year, we almost completely eliminated doing 22-ounce bottles, besides for our barrel-aged beers, which we'll continue to do it on. So we're mainly focusing on doing cans, which our canning line's right behind you right here. We put this in 2013, like I said. We only had the intent when we started to do Watershed. We didn't know how it was going to do. There was a lot of other breweries doing cans in Oregon at the time of our size, and so we just started with Watershed, and we bought what we thought was going to be a year's worth of cans. So we got them in February. We thought that we were going to have them through until December in order, and then we'll do it again and get more for that following year. And we reordered by June. We were like 4 months in and we had to reorder. And then, and the other thing we do is we just keg everything. We just put it in the kegs, and that's basically hooking up right off this machine with a big 4-head filler that way it looks like Medusa. We just fill kegs and roll them out the door, shop them, and drum them in the cooler. Nice. Yeah. So that's the Brewery Oakshire.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. The inner workings.
It's
pretty
pretty
fun. What you do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love showing and talking about it. So.
So, imperials and pastries. What is a pastry beer?
A pastry beer, in the newest context of it, I mean, pastry is really a term that's probably only maybe 4 years old at this point. It's kind of funny that it's came this way because these are flavors of beer that brewers have been using forever. I mean, Sam Smith's chocolate stout has been around for 50 years. I mean, that's an old school English beer that's been using chocolate, and Maui coconut porter, that's been around for 20 years. There's all of these. crap, if you want to look at a Big Black Jack, we've been doing that since 2009. That's cinnamon, allspice, pumpkins, chocolate. Like that can be considered the pastry beer in a way. But what I really think the transition happened is probably 4 or 5 years ago. It went from just adding these flavors to like how extreme can you take these flavors and how much can you make it near resemble a melted piece of chocolate or like, you know, a piece of cake or, you know, in the case of the beer we're going to try Samoa, like a Samoa cookie melted into an alcoholic drink. And that's, I think, really where it started. We're going to start on the lighter end. It is a little palate chasing. Cheers.
Salute.
Prost.
So this beer is called Nui Nui. It's what we're considering a tiki sour beer. And you're like, whoa, what's tiki sour beer? What's that? What the fuck is going on? So this I would consider on that verge of what a pastry beer is. A lot of different, and what you see in the big ones. So we brewed this for the Portland Holiday Ale Festival. And the entire concept was to recreate the famous Nui Nui Tiki drink. This is a drink that was invented during the boom of the tiki culture during the 30s at a place in Southern California called Don the Beachcombers. And it was a secret recipe of what it is, but it was broken down. Essentially, this is, the cocktail was a rum cocktail that was flavored with lime and orange, as well as allspice, cinnamon, and vanilla. Yeah, so there's like a ton of character to it, and you know, we didn't add rum, because that's illegal. But to actually, you know, like add all these characters and have them balance along with the acidity that comes through. I mean, like I said, I would consider this in the category of pastry beer. Technically, it's a cocktail-inspired beer, but all those ingredients equal to complement to what would be, you know, in my sense, pastry.
Yeah.
So there's like an initial like hit to your face of this is sour, and then it goes away very quickly, and then it tastes amazing.
There's so many flavors.
Yeah, and the rest is all flavor.
Yeah. Salute. This one is one that I would drink in lieu of cheesecake or.
This is your close. You could close out your night with this.
Yeah.
That's how I've used it, honestly.
Yeah.
I'll have my dinner and then I'm like, and now it's time for my beer. I'm like, that's mine.
No, this was a fun one to create. So my buddy Brandon Jacobs used to be an employee here. He was our production manager. Actually, I moved into brewing when he left Oakshire. He found his way at the time to McKellar, San Diego. So Brandon came up for Hellshire Day last year, and we talked about doing this beer. Got the blessing to make Beer Geek at Oakshire. So we actually took the iconic Beer Geek recipe, amped it up to as large as possible, and we saw it as the perfect opportunity to make 2 beers. One of them was the take on the classic Beer Geek, which was a coffee version. And then we decided to take another way and do the Samoa cookie version. So this was made with coconut, chocolate, vanilla beans, and beautiful caramel for sure. And then a beautiful coffee again from Farmers Union Coffee Roasters. That wasn't supposed to overpower the coffeeness in it. It wasn't supposed to make it a coffee beer, but it was supposed to hit all the characters, hit that chocolate, hit that caramel, hit that like nuttiness that all blended itself together and really made it seem like there was a Samoa cookie melted into it.
And that's what blows me away. Because I saw all the ingredients, you told us all the ingredients, but like I smell the coffee in it, but I don't taste the coffee. And when I taste this, I taste all Samoa cookie.
Yeah.
And it's delicious.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Salute.
Prost. Oh my goodness.
All I taste is French toast and syrup, which is not a bad thing.
That's it. That's what it's supposed to be.
Good.
So
Tell us everything that is in the brunch.
Because this is delicious.
yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So Brunch and Hell. So every year for Hellshire, they have our Hellshire Day, and since 2016, we started to do different variants of the beer. I love the 2 previous Brunch and Hells, which was just coffee and maple syrup. And I was sitting, talking through like the variants. I was sitting with my girlfriend. So this was actually bourbon barrel aged imperial stout for 9 months, and then into a second bourbon barrel for another 9 months. So double bourbon barrel aged. And I was sitting at brunch with my girlfriend one day, and we were talking through it, and she was like, "I love the other ones. I think you should do French toast." I'm like, okay. like a French toast breakfast. And so that's where it came up. So this is one single barrel. There was about, I want to say almost a gallon of maple syrup poured directly into the barrel. There was about a pound of vanilla beans. About a pound of vanilla beans, like a bunch of cinnamon, and just like beautiful actual cocoa nibs, and a bunch of beautiful coffee from Farmers Union.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you all for coming out. Yeah, this has been great. This is awesome. Thanks for making my Friday.
Yeah, no, thanks for making our Friday. Like, yeah.